Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. Friday, this will be the inauguration of Donald Trump. Over the weekend, he spoke to German tabloid Bild and to the Times of London, but not just to any reporter, to Michael Gove, the former minister who was pro-Brexit and was effectively fired, there he is, by Theresa May in a shakeup that took place when she became the prime minister that's to steer the country towards those Brexit negotiations. With us to talk about it from Strasbourg, Conservative member of the European Parliament, Sajjad Karim. Welcome back to Andrew Lillico, who is with us in London, and here in the studio, Evan O'Connell. One reaction on the hashtag F24 debate. Why did Gove bow to Trump? The pictures of their meeting is quite clear that he did. Is this the new relationship with the USA? Sajjad Karim, relations between Britain and the USA weren't at their best under Obama. He seemed to look more towards Germany.
Well, actually, I think it's quite telling if you look at the interview that Trump gave. He identifies Germany as the key player in Europe so far as he is concerned. But it's quite clear that the United Kingdom has had a very close defense relationship with the USA, whereas Germany has had a very close trading relationship with the USA. Both very valuable relationships, but very different.
Both very valuable, both very different. Let's listen to how Angela Merkel has reacted this Monday after Trump said, you look at the European Union and, quote, it's Germany, basically a vehicle for Germany on Brexit, the refugee crisis. This is her rebuttal.
I think that we Europeans have our fate in our own hands. I'll keep maintaining that the 27 member states must work intensively together for our future.
Andrew Lillico, this taking aim at Germany, is it basically to a grander design to sort of drive a wedge, a further wedge among EU nations?
I think that Trump doesn't particularly understand the European Union's subtleties, and I don't think he's particularly interested in understanding that. I think that when he thinks about questions like the refugees going into Syria, he thinks into Germany, and particularly Syrians, but others as well. He thinks in terms of the debate about migration and illegal immigrants in the United States, and so he's making some signals about that, and he's talking to headlines to some extent. I think that he may be signaling that he doesn't see the European Union in quite the same way that the United States has tended to see the European Union for the past 40 years or so. So they don't see it in quite such positive terms. I think that there's been some antipathy to him in Europe, and he's quite a sensitive man, and that if he sees people as being negative about him, then he tends to be quite negative back. So I think that there's a bit of that going on as well. And but I think that he's also, as well as being quite sensitive, he's quite quick to move on. So I don't think he'll be holding many grudges if people are prepared to deal with him.
One reaction on the hashtag F24 debate. It seems to be directed at you, Evan. Labour politicians criticizing Gove for interviewing Trump. Do they still not realize it's in our best interest to work with and respect Trump?
I completely agree. And yet, I would say that it's in Britain's best interest, first and foremost, to be a strong partner that both works with America but also stands up for itself. I don't think that Theresa May should respond to this kind of provocation in the same way that Trump tried to provoke her on the Nigel Farage ambassador position a few months back. I think that if Donald Trump cares about the relationship with the UK, the UK should take that at face value and ignore all of the showmanship, ignore all of the noise, and most of what Trump is doing with his Twitter, with his pronouncements, it's just trying to get attention. What matters is what Trump actually does when it comes to governing.
All right, so Tuesday, when we see the British Prime Minister give that big speech at Lancaster House, where she's probably going to suggest that Britain leave the common market in Europe, How much influence will Trump have wielded?
I don't think a great deal. I don't think that that Britain's decision to go towards I'd say harder Brexit, a decision that I don't personally agree with, but which seems to be one of the government, and I appreciate at least that there's a clear position. I think that that's a position that's been led first and foremost by domestic political concerns and by the forces within the Conservative Party, first and foremost.
Sajjad Karim, you agree? I mean, it is a special context, isn't it? Everything that's going on. It's not just Brexit. We're now discovering this is the same sort of atmosphere in the United States.
Well, clearly there is a great deal of movement that is taking place throughout Western democracies, throughout Europe, the United Kingdom, and indeed in the USA as well. Now, so far as membership of the single market is concerned, we await to see what particular announcement will eventually be made by the Prime Minister tomorrow, but I believe the expectation is that that announcement will be made, but it will be on the basis that these are the very clear terms upon which we are approaching these negotiations, with a view to moving on from that immediately to seeing what sectoral arrangements can be put in place on a sector-by-sector basis. But just going straight back to the point that you raised about Donald Trump's particular approach to all of these things. If the United Kingdom in any way is to sign up to his approach, then that is as good as saying that our negotiations are over before they have started. We have no intention of doing that at all. What we intend to do is to explain in the clearest possible terms quite what we are looking at as an end point and how we can go about that on a sector-by-sector basis in the meantime.
Sector-by-sector basis, you're talking about a clear strategy. Again, this is a point we brought up in part one of our discussion, Sajjad, which is the Donald Trump approach is mix the message until you get into the nitty-gritty of the actual bargaining, create a bit of confusion, and therefore you've got your bargaining partners on the back foot. Your thoughts on the way Theresa May is approaching all of this?
Well, the British government has stated in very clear terms that the referendum result, as they interpret it, means that we must repatriate powers, we must return sovereignty, taking back control, and we must ensure that the European Court of Justice no longer applies and the freedom of movement principle does not apply in the way that it has done previously. So these are the base points which have all actually been set out in very clear terms. I'm not in any way saying that I completely agree with everything that the British government, although I am a British Conservative, that everything that the British government has put forward, but at least we are starting to see some clarity emerging on this, and I'm looking forward to some further details being provided tomorrow, which really does go against the grain of how Donald Trump would deal with this. But we have got to deal with this as a rules-based society and a nation that respects the rule of law.
All right, markets opening the week with the pound falling to new depths against the dollar and the yen. And it is squarely because of that Tuesday speech by Theresa May, not because of Donald Trump. That say investors will also impact trade.
Just like America, Mrs. May for Great Britain will try to blackmail us by suggesting a hard Brexit. Her strategy will be, let's cut all ties to Europe, and if Europe does not back down, Great Britain will turn into a tax haven with low taxes. I hope that we can come to some sort of agreement with the British. I've always regretted that they'll be leaving us. We still need them.
Andrew Lillicoat, is that the Britain's ace in the hole? Basically, we're going to lower our corporate taxes if you go too hard on us over in Brussels?
I think it's rather a confused thought if that's, and rather disturbing if people in the continent think that Well, no, but I mean, the idea that the British are hoping not to have a deal and that it'll be a matter of trying to blackmail other parties. No, that we're the ones, we want a deal. So I think both sides here want to have a deal. We've not suggested that we would be cut off without any kind of cutting ourselves off without a deal. So it'll be in the interest of both sides to have a deal here. What I
But the
think
government
this might be
has floated the
referring to-
idea of lowering corporate tax.
Well, we lower corporation tax anyway. We were lowering it when we were members of the European Union. I think what this is referring to is an interview that Philip Hammond did when he said that if there were to be some situation in which the EU just completely cut us off and refused to have any kind of deal with at all, then we'd have to think about whether the kind of economic model that we've had based around relatively high levels of welfare and relatively high levels of tax was one that was viable under that new economic reality. And he was saying that we might consider changing things very radically. I doubt we would actually do that, but I think that was just a sort of machination. It's not anything that anybody's interested in doing from the UK perspective. We want to carry on having an intimate trading relationship with the European Union. We want a free trade agreement. We want quite an extensive free trade agreement if we can get one. We want to come to accommodation on common regulatory principles of various sorts, and everything can be friendly. There's no need for us to get into any of these other kinds of lose-lose arrangements as far as I can see.
Evan O'Connell?
I think that what we need first and foremost, and what we haven't had so far from the British side, or we'd seen from the European side, but not from the British side, is a reality-based approach to Brexit. What the Europeans have said from the beginning is these are the basic principles. Either you sign up to the four freedoms or you don't. So either you have freedom of movement or you're not in the single market. For the longest time, and hopefully not for much longer, the British government has been trying to have its cake and eat it, trying to opt for a solution that gives it the benefits without the sacrifices. I wouldn't see them as sacrifices, but the benefits without the, I would say, the perceived drawbacks of EU membership. And at some point, I think there will have to be a clear position, and I'm glad to hear that Theresa May will probably be coming out with a position that I disagree with, but at least is a position.
All right, but the free movement of people, the head of the Labour Party seems to be showing wiggle room on that, more than wiggle room. Jeremy Corbyn saying he's not going to, I forget his exact words, but he's not going to make it a principle that's cast in stone. I think that's roughly what he said.
Well, he said that, and it's opposite.
And several people inside of the Labour Party are now saying, well, maybe there can be free movement of people for skilled workers, but not for unskilled workers coming from other EU nations. So the Labour Party itself seems to be coming around to this idea that somehow free movement of people is negotiable.
I think you're seeing that among some quarters in the Labour Party. I think that Jeremy Corbyn flirted with the idea for about 2 seconds of ceding some ground on freedom of movement, and then very quickly moved back to his default position. I think that you will see a Labour Party that continues to defend freedom of movement within the European space for the foreseeable.
Sajad Karim, you rub elbows with people from across the continent. At the end of the day, can there be a deal where the EU agrees to renege on the free movement of people?
Well, this idea that the free movement of people is somehow cast in stone actually doesn't stand up to analysis. If you actually consider the United Kingdom's own position, it was a London decision which allowed for the new EU member states in 2004 and then latterly in 2007 with Bulgaria and Romania for their citizens to be able to access the UK labour markets. There was in place a procedure of 7 years at an EU level to allow for people to properly deal with the changes that could come about. But the UK decided not to go with that. We are already hearing a number of arguments being presented from other member states about adjustments that are required, including, in fact, from Germany itself in relation to entitlement to benefits for people that move from one member state to another. So this idea that freedom of movement doesn't have any sort of quality or qualification involved in it is something which doesn't stand up to examination. However, of course, the European Union is going to continue to say that it is one of the 4 fundamental freedoms and it must remain. Yes, it will remain and it must remain, but there is room for adjustments within that principle.
As the pound falls as well, Sajjad Karim, your thoughts on this idea of the government to lower corporate taxes? At what point will it rub EU negotiating partners the wrong way?
Actually, I remain very optimistic that we will have a very pragmatic solution arrived at the end of the day, because we have a situation here where we can turn this into either a lose-lose situation or a situation which allows some form of very deep-rooted trading relationship to remain. And I believe it is the latter that everybody will be willing to invest their political capital in, not the former. There is nothing to be gained politically by opting for the former.
A deep-rooted partnership. Andrew Lillico, you agree?
I think this discussion's got very confused. There's no intention in the UK whatever of being in the single market. It's been clear for many months that we're not going to be in the single market. So the question of whether you can be in the single market and have not have free movement really doesn't arise. We're not going to be in it. And equally, it's just not true that there's any material connection between in the EU with having its free trade agreements and free movement. The EU has a free trade agreement with Korea. It doesn't have free movement with Korea. It has a free trade agreement with Mexico. It doesn't have free movement with Mexico.
Andrew,
we're talking about free trade agreement.
Andrew, we're talking about 2 very different things. We're talking about a single market on the one hand and a free trade agreement on the other. The two are very, very different things.
Free trade agreement. Yeah, no, exactly. And we're not intending to be in the single market. What we want is a free trade agreement. We don't want to be in the single market. That discussion is dead in the UK. Theresa May will put it, finally, whatever residual question there was, she'll put that to bed on Tuesday.
Theresa May put it to bed on Tuesday. It hasn't been killed so far. And I'm glad in many ways to hear that finally there will be some clarity on this. Unfortunately, it's clarity in my opinion the wrong direction, but at least it's a clear position. What I would say though is that the more complicated the agreement, the more granularity there is in terms of specific sectors and sector-based agreements, the longer this agreement will take to negotiate. CETA, the trade agreement with Canada, for instance, took about 4 years to negotiate, I believe. This will be an even deeper agreement, I would imagine. This is why you need some kind of transitional arrangement, and I would hope that that even the most fervent Brexiteers would understand that that Britain can't simply cut itself off from Europe from one day to the next.
All right. So Britain, as usual, will be between the United States and Europe, whatever happens. One final question. I'll put it to you, Sajjad Karim, because earlier we spoke with Politico.eu's Nicholas Vineker, who was talking about that visit last Thursday by the French far-right leader Marine Le Pen, also to Trump Tower. He said that his reporting found she was probably there for fundraising purposes. What do you think of Donald Trump's friends in Europe?
Well, this is something that concerns me immensely. We have a situation emerging where of course, following Brexit, we had Donald Trump actively supporting Nigel Farage in the United Kingdom. Nigel Farage was actively supporting Donald Trump then in the USA. So far as Marine Le Pen is concerned, immediately after Trump had been elected, we started to hear reports that his main campaign advisors and organizers were starting to help Marine Le Pen. Marine Le Pen is somebody that we discovered here, in fact, in the European Parliament, and I chair the European Parliament's Code of Conduct Committee. We discovered that she was receiving funding by way of very friendly and loosely termed loans from Russian banks. So that influence is there. Now, bearing in mind the type of activities that have been discovered in the United States of America so far as cyber attacks from Russia are concerned as well, I think it would be deeply irresponsible if we here in Europe today said that we are quite satisfied that everything is above board. Quite far from it. And it seems to me that a lot of investment is being made in those people who are going to not only challenge our democracies, it's quite right, democracies should be challenged, but they are actually going to gnaw away at the very fabric of what makes our democratic societies.
Sajjad Karim, I want to thank you for joining us from Strasbourg. I want to thank Andrew Lillico for being with us from London, Evan O'Connell as well.